America does not love Black women that it can't silence and objectify. And that's exactly what the Aunt Jemima trope was, a silent, smiling object to be propped up on their breakfast tables and consumed. I'm Dara Star Tucker, and this is The Breakdown. Many of you might have first encountered my content from a video of mine that addressed this issue last year. Aunt Jemima does not belong on the front of a pancake box. Now, initially, I didn't understand why the removal of the character touched a nerve with people like it did, but I was glad to help folks come to a better understanding of why PepsiCo and Quaker finally made the decision to remove the Aunt Jemima name and image after 130 years. PepsiCo Quaker has always maintained that Aunt Jemima has never been based on any one person. And they're right, there is no real Aunt Jemima. She's based on the creation of a white man in blackface. She's a slave mammy of the plantation South. The first woman to play Aunt Jemima, Nancy Green, didn't embody the character until a few years after it was named. They just used a crude drawing of a mammy at first. And Nancy didn't die rich, far from it. She was fired by Quaker after she refused to go overseas to promote the product. After that, she lived with her niece and nephew because she couldn't afford her own home. She was very benevolent, but far from wealthy. Many other women have played the character and appeared on the box over the years, but the final caricature depicted on the box for the last 30 years was a composite figure created by a cartoonist after groups like the NAACP had complained about the usage of a mammy figure for decades. It wasn't an ideal solution, but it helped for a while. The crazy part is that Quaker had erased all memory of Nancy Green, the first woman to portray Aunt Jemima, until the early 2000s, when Chicago historian Sherry Williams did some research and discovered her history. She was buried in an unmarked pauper's grave. When Sherry reached out to PepsiCo Quaker to request that they help with paying for a tombstone for her, they refused. Sherry eventually raised the money and had the tombstone installed herself. By now, I would think most people would be aware of why the pancake mix was rebranded, but I've started to see more and more social media pages, particularly from Black creators, blaming cancel culture for removing the image of a supposedly successful Black woman for no good reason. Political operatives have a vested interest in keeping low vibration culture wars like this going. It allows them to drive a wedge between people with very easy to understand issues like mammies on syrup bottles. Issues like this are a gift to them. People don't have to investigate them deeply or inform themselves of any historical or political realities. Just convince them that the liberal left hates Black people so much that they want to remove their images from grocery store shelves. Hopefully they'll remember that at election time. A 12-year-old could understand that. And believe me, there were plenty of them in my comment section railing against the so-called cancel culture that took away their favorite plantation dweller. The viral post that I made about Aunt Jemima was one of the best and worst things I've ever done online. It helped me to launch my social media presence, but behind the scenes, I was being barraged with the most vile, hateful, racist comments I had ever had to deal with. I was called the N-word more times than I could count. I was insulted in every way possible. I even received death threats over a syrup bottle. The issue struck a chord with a lot of people, and I quickly learned that this goes way deeper than pancakes. This really has to do with our culture's desire to control Black identity, particularly Black female identity. Contrary to what many talking heads would have you believe, the movement to remove that mammy image and name didn't come from woke left-wing liberals. It came from Black people. The NAACP was protesting that image from day one, but more recently, Black women were at the forefront of calls to remove it. The singer Kirby was the first person to make a TikTok video addressing this controversy just weeks after the killing of George Floyd in 2020. That was the video that created the final public outcry against the brand and led PepsiCo and Quaker to rebrand. In my estimation, the real issue was that this long-standing stereotype of Black womanhood was being trifled with. Historically, it was always something to deride and to mock. Let's not forget that the reason her image was used in the first place was to remind white people of the mammies that they grew up with, or wish they did. The product was failing before they started using her image as a marketing tactic. She was never meant to be seen as having any agency. She wasn't portrayed as the owner of the brand. She was always meant to be a servant. It only takes one cursory look at the marketing around that caricature to figure that out. They buffed and shined her up over the years because of continual protests from the Black community, but she remains what she has always been, a slave in a box, because that's what she was created to be. But the legacy of that character has often been conflated with the legacy of the women who portrayed her. Some would have you believe that to call out the blatant racism of putting this character on a box of pancake mix is to disrespect the memories of Nancy Green, Anna Short Harrington, Lillian Richards, and the many women who helped develop this character over the years, as if there's no way to celebrate those women and the legacy they left behind while simultaneously acknowledging that it was time to retire this racist trope. Quaker has never properly compensated or honored those women, and that's absolutely absolutely unacceptable. The families sued PepsiCo and Quaker for back royalties for the use of these women's images in 2014. They also claimed that these women helped to develop the recipe and that Quaker never paid them for it, but they had no proof and the suit was thrown out. The removal of that caricature is a complex issue. It's really tied to the legacy of Black women in America and how their descendants have grappled with that legacy over the years. The descendants of Nancy Green, Anna Short Harrington, and Lillian Richards, who all played the Aunt Jemima character. Sherry Williams, who rediscovered the existence of Nancy Green and did her best to bring honor to her memory. Public figures like Deborah Roberts and Gayle King, who have reported on this story. Kirby, who raised this issue at a crucial time and affected real change. And me, a Black woman who's seeking to educate people around issues of race and culture. We've all lived with a deep understanding of what these mammy stereotypes represent, and our attempts to address the rebranding have taken many forms. We speak out against the mammy stereotype. We speak out in support of the women who put food on the table for their families by portraying that stereotype. We speak out because our mothers and grandmothers could not. What really surprised me about the thousands and thousands of negative comments that I and others have received for speaking up about this is how young many of the commenters were. Many of them were young boys. If you're a Black woman in America, chances are you've heard the term Aunt Jemima being thrown around pejoratively. There was nothing positive associated with it. That is, until they decided to remove it. Then suddenly she was everyone's favorite grandma. They couldn't live without her, when the real truth was the target of their objectification was being erased. Had any of them ever fought this hard to protect a real-life Black woman? Clearly not. They've attacked a real-life Black woman for the right to objectify a fake one. And that's why a lot of this rhetoric around preserving this beloved character rings hollow. How many people reposting this planted outrage story know who Madam C.J. Walker is, the real first Black female millionaire? How many of them turn up their nose when Oprah Winfrey's name is mentioned, the wealthiest Black woman in America? How many of them celebrated Michelle Obama when she became the first Black woman to become America's first lady? One of the few TikTok videos where I've had to disable comments was when I posted an innocuous video of Michelle Obama. I don't even have words to describe how disgusting those comments were. You can't post about Serena Williams, Whoopi Goldberg, Stacey Abrams, or any Black woman with a voice without running into the same nonsense. America does not love Black women that it can't silence and objectify. And that's exactly what the Aunt Jemima trope was, a silent, smiling object to be propped up on their breakfast tables and consumed. And when Black women said that's enough, their true feelings about us came to the surface. But we will continue to speak out for those Black women who have been objectified and silenced. And we will insist that we be regarded as more than the caricature that they have made us out to be.